Alright, look, I know I'm mostly an IEM channel. I do headphones every now and then, but sometimes I gotta send something funky like speakers. That's new. Delivery package man was not very kind to it, but hopefully everything's gonna be a-okay, and we're gonna attempt to use these for gaming and see how that goes, because there's a whole field of people just using speakers purely for gaming because, you know, nothing in your ears, nothing on your ears, and nice and cool, just good sound. This is assuming that you have a, a place that doesn't have a lot of noise going around in the background to distract you from the sound, but, hey, for those of you who do, and you can use speakers, let's check it out. Now in the box, of course, are the speakers, which are, to my surprise, fully made of metal. That was very shocking to me, which I think is pretty cool. You also get little rubber flappy feet things, essentially, so you can just put them on top of them so that they don't vibrate and on the table and make funny noises. You get a cable for the wall, cable to plug them together, cable in case you want to use a 3.5mm source, the other part of the cable for the power, and angled feet, actually, I just found, which you can also use to hold this up, but it'll hold it up at an angle in case you want to have a better angle for it to point at your ears, depending on what level your table is at. Now, some of you guys who aren't familiar with speakers may be wondering, are the feet really that important? Yes. These are speakers. They're not like headphones or earbuds which are already shooting into your ears. These sit on your table or on a stand, and depending on where they are, you want them to be, you essentially want them to be pointing towards your ears, whether it be using this because they're more closer to head level, or this because they're lower than head level and they're sitting on your desk or something like that. Personally, I think I'll be using these guys for that quality factor. Oh man, I almost forgot, but there's also a manual, which we may probably not read. Alright, now this is a speaker pairing, so that means you can't use both the speakers by themselves. One of them will essentially need the other to work. This is the left unit, and as you see, no controls, no nothing, just a connector to this guy, the right unit. So the right unit will have all the controls and whatnot for the volume, the bass, and you got all the plugs and whatnot. Oh, there's even RGB. That's probably why they sent this to me. APO sent this to me for review, by the way, but I can say whatever I want. Once again, I guess the RGB and we'll make sure that it's for gaming, I guess. Choose your inputs in the back. There's power in case you want to turn it off and on. And you can choose if this speaker right here is the left or right one in case you want to have the controls on the other side. Now, this entire thing greatly surprised me because this is all metal. The moment I took it out of the box, it is cold to the touch. And I don't know if this is going to affect the acoustics or whatnot, but it feels pretty good. I like it a lot. What I also like is the fact they put a little cover on the tweeter here. That always gets punched in by something or someone. Kids like to punch them in, especially at the store. So I do like the fact that they protected it. Not the prettiest protection because that's a sort of an ugly grill, I will say. The rest of the design, I will say, is very neat, but I am very curious now of what the RGB means. I can only imagine it's this bottom piece because translucent, but we'll find out in a little bit, right? Oh, what is that? Oh, that's a paint chip. This is a loaner unit, so someone else used this before. But I guess that does tell you that these aren't, you can't be like throwing these guys around. Gotta be careful. That's a paint chip, so I mean, it feels like durable paint, but one of the reviewers out there managed to chip it, so oh well. Now for some reference, I do game with speakers on my main setup, and what I do use for reference, no pun intended, are reference speakers, or, they are. They are the Mackie CR3s, and they're significantly larger, so I'm kind of curious how they're going to sound in comparison, because usually smaller speakers will be a little bit quieter, but supposedly these are slightly larger, so it's using bigger drivers, and I'm hoping it's going to sound, well, not just louder, but better. My main thing is quality, and so far I actually already want to buy this guy over and get rid of my CR3s just because of the fact that, man, the build is amazing here and it looks good, and I want to see that light up. Let's see what it looks like. Let me just, yeah, there we go. Ooh, oh, okay, RGB button changes the RGB modes. Interesting. All right, that's pretty cool. Alright, now after giving them a thorough listen, I do have some ups and downs. I will say I was impressed, but also disappointed at the same time. And it comes in two different regions of things, which is going to be very interesting. So, on the music side of things, that's where I was kind of disappointed, but I guess we'll start there because, things only get better from here, but also I could get into the sound. So, the sound of these guys, wide's disappointing. Starting from the sub-bass, lower bass levels, there's so little of it. There's very little sub-bass. That lower, deep, growly region, not really there much. The weight was lacking, and I love sub-bass. I love dark sounds, that's my bias, and it lacks that quite greatly, unfortunately. On the bright side, as you move up, the mid-bass isn't too bad, but even then I wouldn't say it's like, bass head levels. It's very much like monitor-y kind of level, so studio monitor-esque kind of levels, which is okay, because, I thought they sounded really clean, very clear, and that's really good for like a mid-bass region. I will say the punch still has a good degree of punch to it. It's not a whole lot, but you can still feel it decently, though to do that, I did have to crank up like the little bass knob in the back to maximum, so there is that. As for the mids and the highs in these guys, they are amazing. They're actually really good. They got really clean and clear mids, lots of detail sprinkled in by the highs, and just overall really good. And the highs never got too high. It was just a really good sound in those regions. No complaints whatsoever. Really sounds amazing, especially compared to like my Mackie CR3s. I do better at the low end, but from the mids and the highs, man, these are really good. Just a matter of crispy sound right here. And it gets even better because the soundstage on these guys is noticeably very large. It's really great. I mean, it makes sense because they're speakers, but I could tell they sounded large, and I think it's also because they had really good sound separation. That was striking to me compared to like my CR3s. You know, don't get me wrong, my CR3s do an okay job, but not nearly as good as these guys. I keep forgetting the name of them. I have the box here somewhere. The FiiO SP3s. These just really good sound separation. I was shockingly surprised by it. And you know, for music and mastering, I guess that seems to be important, and like finding different sounds that are being made in the song. Granted, I was still like missing the sub bass, so you know, that's why I didn't prefer these for music. However, all these little bits and whatnot made it really good for gaming. And this is because with all this included, I would say that it was also a very precise set. Of course, you had to put it in the right spot on your table and at the right height for this precision, so that's very important. You gotta, you know, make sure it's all tuned up well, and how far it is from the wall, how close it is to you, how high up is it, how low is it angled right, all that stuff. You gotta pay attention to that. But once you got it tuned in at the right spots where you're sitting, it is actually particularly really good for gaming, competitive shooters and whatnot. The sound sounded really good. I could find things pretty easily. Mind you, it was a little bit more difficult finding things behind me because they still are speakers, but for some games they're still able to pull off sounds behind you pretty okay, so that's pretty good. But you know, if you're into speakers, then yeah, these seem to be almost tuned for gaming. There's enough of all the sounds you need, and the sound separation is incredible, so it makes tracking really good. Still, I will prefer using IEMs or headphones for gaming because I can get just a better idea of things around me. But if you're a speaker user and you want to use speakers for gaming, I think these would do an amazing job. It's just really good. And even if you're playing like non-competitive games and more open world stuff, I still think it did a good job. I still wish there was a little bit more sub bass to give more like into the lower end, but it was still actually pretty enjoyable. And speaking of the sub bass being added, I wish there was a port for like a subwoofer on this in case you want to add it down the line, but that does not exist for this guy, unfortunately. So if you wanted to add more sub bass with a subwoofer, you can't. There's no port for that here. Someone's going to ask about like how they sound in comparison to each other, so I might as well now. Hey, post video editing Paul. I'm editing the video right now, and I guess I wanted to also note that when listening to speakers recorded through a microphone, it's not the most realistic representation of how it's actually going to sound. So in person, trust me, compared to the recording here, the speakers, both of them sound much nicer, but what I say afterwards still does stand. So you know, there is that. What I'm trying to say is essentially to actually know how speakers sound, you're gonna have to hear it yourself. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, I guess that goes for every headphone and IEM opinion out there, so there is that. Just, you know, do remember this when it comes to that kind of stuff, because like recordings is not quite gonna be the same as actually just listening to the actual thing, you know? So, you know, do keep that in mind when you're like watching and listening for this stuff, okay? This is just to show like the difference between the two at, you know, a certain level. I don't know if you can tell, but like the Mackie CR3s are nowhere near as clean sounding as the SP3s, especially even in the bass region. Like there's more bass, there's more sub bass, but it wasn't exactly the cleanest in the world. It's just, you know, it's good for you to feel, which is kind of nice for enjoyment. But if you're here for like the cleanliness of it, you know, the SP3s do better. Granted, the SP3s don't have nearly enough sub bass. I like having sub bass, that's just me, so I'm a little disappointed in this region, but once again, for gaming, it was really good. That being said, you may be wondering who these are for, and are they worth it, because they're $300. They're not for bass heads for sure, they're not for anyone who enjoys like that sub bass for sure. They're for someone who wants more of like monitor-y-ish kind of sound, and is okay with like letting go with a little bit of like the feel of the sub bass, you know? Granted, I know some people, if they do monitoring work, they would also like to have the sub bass because they're like mixing and mastering things with sub bass, so there is that, in which case you wouldn't want these. But if you're someone who wants sound from like, you know, really good from the upper bass to everything else, I think these do an excellent job. And if you're particularly a gamer, which is most of you guys that are on my channel, if you're a gamer, I know these are $300, but typically when you buy speakers, you buy one and you're done for like years. These are absolutely worth it, especially if you play like competitive games with it. You're a competitive game player who likes using speakers instead of headphones and earbuds. These would do an excellent job. And, you know, if you're okay with them not having sub bass for the days you're not playing games and you're listening to music that has sub bass, you're gonna be missing it. But if you're okay with losing that just for the sheer excellence of them at the price and the build, I think they would be really good for you. But outside of that, I don't know. You'd have to really think about your own taste and if you like this sort of sound or not. For me, it's sort of a maybe. Like, I kind of want to buy my own set to keep for gaming, but then most of the time I game with earbuds and I listen to music with the speakers. Or I'll also listen to music with the earbuds too. Really depends on the mood, I guess. I mean, I guess sometimes I do play games on the speakers too. Depends on the mood once again. I mean, I kind of want them. They're pretty cool. They look really nice. They look way better on my table. Mackies, you know, they like using the green rings, and so there's that. Also, if you're trying to develop like a really nice setup and you're like wanting speakers that are white, these also come in white, so there is that. And if you do want to buy them or not, it's up to you. I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but I still think they're an excellent buy if it fits in the categories that I just mentioned earlier. So if you want to buy them, I'll leave a link in the description. It's an affiliate link. Gives me a kickback so I don't like die in this terrible world. Granted, it's not a whole lot, but you know, it's something. Helps me out a little bit. But if you want to buy them off somewhere else, then you know, that's up to you too. I'm not gonna stop you. But that's pretty much all I have for today, and guess I'll see you guys next time, huh?